Everyone. Welcome to the next edition of the Community Board 14 Bylaws Committee. We left off last time with the discussing changes to the regional committees, so I think we can hopefully pick up there, unless if there's anything that anyone wants to circle back to. I think, as we previewed last time, Joanne had made some proposals for modifying the topical committees. I think we started discussing that. So we can take a deeper dive into that this evening. And hopefully we have enough time to make further headway on Article 6, which is the committee section. So that is hopefully what we'll accomplish tonight. I did send to Anya right before the start of this meeting the document that we're working off of, if anyone wants to pull that up. Otherwise, I'm sharing my screen. Should have what Anya circulated. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to put together an agenda, but it should be, I think we'll just work through the Article 6 just in order, as we'll go in order as we usually do. And Jonathan, I don't know if you had anything else to add before we get started. I see Officer Joseph is here. Hi, Officer Joseph. Thanks for attending. Anything on your end, Jonathan, before we proceed?
Well, just that I don't know if everyone already heard. I mean, I know obviously a lot of people know it, but officially not a board member at this moment. By virtue of the expiration, it's today's after. I don't know if the borough president actually appointed. So I will be here, formally as a community resident, but of course, as a very experienced community board 14 person. So I'll chime in when appropriate and helpful. But yeah, so I can't officially preside over the meeting.
Okay.
Here, and I'll do basically most of what we were doing before, without the official one. That's all I got.
Fair enough. Oh, I see Joanne has her hand up. What's up, Joanne?
So two things. Jonathan, we can talk offline about this, but there is the ability for you to serve on this committee as a public member, so feel free to invoke that. And we can talk again offline about that as well. And I'm not sure if we are going to revisit the regional committees, but I know that Sean had some thoughts about this recently. So if we are beyond that, I know maybe she might want to chime in on the regional committee.
No, I don't think we're beyond that. I think we're close to agreeing on what was proposed, but I think we didn't take any final decision and decided to basically sleep on it and revisit, come back this time. And I actually made some modifications to the introductions of the regional committees above since the last time. So I wanted to nothing. Well, so I guess to start, just the way the section begins, or section C, the board standing committee shall consist of, instead of the following, it was just basically, so the numbering and lettering, I was trying to figure out how to do it in a sensible way. So just shall consist of regional committees and topical committees, and then next we'll go into regional committees. So I don't know, in looking at this, I didn't love the regional committees shall be responsible for general planning and analysis and review function within their geographical areas, because at least as far as I know, since I've been on the board, there really hasn't been anything to that degree of these committees actually doing that. So rather than having a sentence about function, I thought maybe just start with board members are assigned to regional committees based on their residence, or alternatively, if they do not live in the district where their employment or other interest in the district exists. I don't know if that's a totally accurate statement. I was just making an assumption, but hopefully that's something close to right. But if someone wants to chime in and disagree with me about that, it we should have something about functionality rather than, how folks are assigned, or, has any other ideas for how to start this off. I'm all ears. Jonathan, I don't know if you want to weigh in here.
Here we go. I do. Every committee needs to have some sort of purpose. So, I mean, though it was a vague purpose that's already written in there, it kind of covers what it needs to. So, I don't think we should just say it should be used for nominating committee purposes only or anything like that. There should be a purpose to it, or something. I mean, maybe we just say, for the purposes of nominating committee appointment only, the regional committee shall be constituted based on residence and so forth. I mean, we could do that. But also, just because it hasn't been used before in any recent memory, doesn't mean that there couldn't be a purpose to having a regional committee meet once a year and like, hey, what's going on in our district, like in our area? Do we want? I mean, that's obviously the call of the chair if they think that's a good idea, but I don't know that we should just scrap it.
Okay, I hear you. Sean, you have your hand up?
I just had a simple thing, was to change other to significant so it mimics the language of the charter. But now, riffing a little bit off of what Jonathan said, I don't know, I can't articulate it really quickly, but the thought I'm having is that one thing board members are so helpful with is sort of being the eyes and ears in their hyperlocal part of our district. So maybe assigning that to regional committee members shall bring, issues and conditions of their region to the attention of the community board office. Does that fulfill a purpose need and sound like a useful one?
Sure.
Because one of the things that I used to do and then got out of the habit, but in the beginning, the chair of the regional committee, if there was something going on in the district, like National Grid sent that they were going to be working on Avenue N and East 26th Street, that would go to the regional committee chair as an FYI. And then assuming that person had networks, community neighborhood associations and stuff like that, that would be another way to get the word out. And I could certainly get back into the practice of doing that. So that would kind of fall under that same rubric, to be the eyes and ears, both looking in and looking out.
Okay. No, that makes sense. I like that.
The flip side of that is it might actually empower the regional chairs to be a little more ownership. Because now thinking of it might actually prompt it to have like a regional committee hearing or something, like, hey, let's talk about issues on this and do that once.
Jonathan, just so you know, you sound a little bit underwater. Could you repeat what you said? Like, I caught some of it, but you sounded a bit underwater for part of what you were saying.
Do I sound any better now?
Slightly.
Slightly better. Okay. We'll try to. What I was saying is that by putting language in that encourages the regional committee members to be the eyes and ears of the community, might actually spur regional members and the regional chair to take a more proactive role. And since we're all going to be aware of that change, might actually be a positive to engage on that regional to be more proactive, having maybe a meeting or a public hearing. Just I don't know if I can do any better.
Still breaking up a little bit, and I don't know if you're having headset issues or what. But yeah, I think hopefully folks got most of that. But I think Florencia had her hand up.
Yes, I
Florencia?
did.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone.
Hello.
And yes, I just wanted to say that I like that idea because I think Sean will tell you that I usually report whatever is going on, not only in this part of the district, but wherever. Not only in the northern section or Region 1, but I usually report whatever it is that I think is, or if something's happening and I don't know, I usually ask. And Sean has been gracious to, if she's not aware of it, then she'll find out and then like email me back or something. And, if it's something that affects the community, I usually put it out there. I put it on Facebook, Twitter, whatever platform, and just and sometimes I go around and even talk to the merchants and, folks within that section, and just let them have a heads up if it's something that affects them. So I like that idea. Just to say, and I just want to say it's been a pleasure working with you guys. I wasn't reappointed, so but it's been fun. Sorry.
I would hold on to that goodbye because things are still in flux right now. So unless you're trying to get out of here, just
No, I
slow.
wasn't trying to.
Okay,
I'm sorry,
then slow your roll because things are still in flux. We're working on it.
Okay, all right. Okay, thanks anyway. Thank you.
Oh, we're always happy to hear what you have to say, Florencia, certainly. So I guess based on what Sean was saying, I wrote regional committees shall be responsible for bringing issues of interest within their local region to the board's attention. I don't know if we want to expand beyond that. But that's kind of that's kind of what I went with for there. And then board members are assigned to regional committees based on their residence, or alternatively, they do not live in the district where their employment and or significant interest in the district exists. The regions are as follows. And we discussed last time the proposed changes to the regional borders based on, I guess, the map that Joanne had circulated, or that I had recirculated that Joanne had prepared.
Steve,
Okay.
Can I jump in on that?
Yep.
Bringing issues of interest within their local region to the board's attention, and facilitating communication. Is that too vague, or does that round it out? Okay.
I think that's fine.
Okay.
Nikki has her hand up. What's up, Nikki?
Hi. I just wanted to comment. First of all, I hope Florencia gets reappointed because I like hearing you too, Florencia. And I just wanted to comment. It's not really about the language. I just really like this idea because I sometimes wonder, like for our topical committee meetings, the names of the committees are pretty obvious about what they do. And, if you live in the community and you have that kind of concern, you should come to one of those meetings. But I also think this is kind of nice because maybe somebody would be more interested in showing up or attending a more regional committee like this with stuff, because maybe they're shy about not knowing where their concern belongs, right? And they're like, oh, I don't know. So I just wanted to say that I wasn't at the last meeting, but I like this change and I think it's cool and good job. And I think the language looks good. And I think that very generic description is actually nice.
Okay. Great. So thanks for that, Nikki. So I guess with that, let's look at what I guess before we move on, was there any further discussion just as far as how the borders were changed? So the Region 1 is the northern border instead of going starting at the Long Island Railroad. It's instead of the southern border being at the Long Island Railroad, it's Titmus Avenue. Regional Committee 2 is staying the same. Regional Committee 3 now is going from the north Titmus Avenue to Long Island Railroad, and the western and eastern border is staying the same. Regional Committee 4, basically that is expanding in size below the, basically it's everything in the district below the Long Island Railroad now, as opposed to just east of Ocean Avenue below Long Island Railroad. So I think, I think this has been brought up in the bylaws committee, and I think at one other time, I'm forgetting now, maybe in the in one of the lunch and learns, maybe. But I just want to make sure there's no further discussion on that. It does look like Joanne has her hand up.
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit. I gave a presentation in the executive committee. And all I want to say is just want to add a caveat. Once Borough Hall and the electeds get the official appointment list together, we'll reproof the numbers to see where they land and that they hold water.
Cool. Nikki, did you have something else, or is your hand up from before?
Nope, I just forgot to put it down. Sorry.
No worries. No worries. All right, so let's just read out what we have so far, I guess, and then we'll move on to the last part of the regional committee, which we discussed last week. But okay. So as it stands now, so C, the board standing committee shall consist of regional committees and topical committees. One, regional committees shall be responsible for bringing issues of interest within their local region to the board's attention and facilitating communication. Board members are assigned to regional committees based on their residence, or alternatively, if they do not live in the district, where their employment and or significant interest in the district exists. The regions are as follows: Region 1, northern border to Ditmas Avenue, western border to Ocean Avenue. Region 2, northern border to Long Island Railroad, Ocean Avenue to eastern border. Region 3, Ditmas Avenue to Long Island Railroad, western border to Ocean Avenue. And Region 4, Long Island Railroad to southern border, western border to eastern border. Any comments or further discussion as to that beginning part of Article 6, Section C1? Not seeing any hands. Okay.
Oh.
Yep.
Sorry. Just is there a rule against providing illustrations in this document? Like inserting.
You want to see the map? I can try to.
No, it's not even because I need to see it. It's just like, again,
Oh.
a brand new board member having to whip out a map to do that. Like, can we just insert a JPEG?
I'm open to that.
I just
I
think it
think
would
if we
be
do an appendix, yeah.
That, or I was going to suggest maybe a hyperlink of Section C1, just of each. Yeah, I think that might work. Just what Joanne had showed us previously. I know it was like a Google map of sorts.
All right. Yeah, I'll note a hyperlink. I think it's a good idea. Okay. Great. Good suggestion. All right. So then the other part of this that we had discussed was whether to allow for, I guess, changes to the borders as appointments change, or perhaps demographics change. So whether it should be revisited only when we revisit the bylaws, or if there is an ability to make those changes on an interim basis. So I forget exactly where we left off on that, but I guess what I currently have here is the executive committee shall have discretion to propose modifications of regional committee borders when warranted to ensure appropriate representation based on board membership changes and local demographic changes. The executive committee's proposal can then be presented to the board for approval. Regional committee border modifications must be approved by the board to take effect for the following year. But yeah. Yeah, Sean?
Yeah, thanks. This is where I had expressed some concerns about optics of changing regional borders based on appointments that we don't really have any agency over. And if we keep chasing the crowd and redrawing lines, and at the same time are losing populations in a certain region and then just adjusting to it, I mean, I'm worried a little bit that, there are representation of Black community members is down over the past several years. Representation from the southern end of the district is also down. So I just worry about sort of chasing that dynamic that we don't really have any control over. So I guess what I was trying to assert, and I think we've brought it up in other sections, is this distance between what where our board, that the borough president appoints the board. So I said to Joanne something about the executive committee shall review with Department of City Planning the distribution of board appointments and advise the borough president on the geographic distribution of board appointments to ensure that regions are properly represented, or something like that. So clunky. And it's a lot of concepts in one thing. So I just don't know what part of it is our burden. But when there were, reports just a few years ago about community board membership not reflecting the diversity of their communities, it didn't really pertain to us, but because we did at the time, but that it wouldn't be our fault if we didn't, So that's, I didn't articulate it well, but Jonathan's nodding at least enough that I think I'm hitting at least some point that I'm trying to make.
Yeah, Jonathan, you want to chime in?
Yeah, so first tell me if I sound better since I got rid of the headphones.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. I fully concur with Sean said. I had reservations about this sort of loosey-goosey way for the current board leadership, which probably will start to change, I think, more frequently in the coming years. I don't think we'll see the 30-year plus tenure thing happen.
Not that we
anymore.
don't love Joanne. Not that we don't love Joanne.
No, of course not. Of course not. No, and anybody else who's on there, but I do think that time that's changing, and then time has come for that to change. And so I think we have to be mindful of those dynamics. So I don't particularly love the idea that the executive committee, which could protect itself, should decide to get rid of term limits, and which term limits only apply to the chairperson, by the way, they don't apply to everybody else. So I don't particularly love the idea that they could sort of decide this and then push it through the board at an advantageous time. And to Sean's point, that then it's really going to basically be up to how the borough president decides to appoint members from what parts of the district. So I think I think there are a lot of problems with making that an internal process of redistricting. Again, if we think of redistricting for legislative districts and the mess that usually is, I think we have to look at the broader history of community boards, and they're not immune to petty squabbles and disputes in general, though our board has been pretty good that way. So I don't think we should do this personally unless it were through a bylaw amendment. I do think that there is wisdom in revisiting it. I do think that there is wisdom baked into this change right now, because the distribution of population density and distinctive community identity, I think, generally lines up very well with the proposed changes that Joanne spent a lot of time and thought into crafting. So I think it makes sense where we are now. And I think we should just simply remember as a board that if it seems to not be reflective or inclusive enough, that then we come up with a bylaw amendment to revise them. And I don't think we should create any special procedure that bypasses a bylaw amendment process to make changes to this in the future. So I would be cool with just striking that whole paragraph out, but I would also be okay with the idea of putting in some affirmative provision that says there should be some effort made to assess it on a not so frequent basis, but maybe every so often, maybe every 5 years, or maybe it should be in line with the census. I don't know. But I don't think there's a problem with that. I just don't think there should be anything short of a bylaw amendment that allows that change to occur. So that's my thought.
Okay, I hear what you're saying. I think that makes sense. I also see Carl has his hand up. So I don't know where you come out on this, Carl.
Sure, yeah. So thanks, Steve. Thanks, everybody. My main question was to Sean, because when she was sharing some of her thoughts and concerns on this paragraph, she mentioned, some potential language, including city planning. So I was just hoping if Sean could elaborate further on, what role city planning would play in that part. So that was my question about that.
So it's city planning that does a sort of population assessment of how many, for instance, how many board appointees or how many board nominations each city council member gets. And it's based on the population that resides within the amount of district that they overlap with. So for instance, the 40th Council District has something like 14 nominations to the board, and then the 45th District has maybe 4 or 5, and then like the 48th District only has 2, and Kalman's district is what, the 44th maybe has 3 or 4. So it's not, they don't get an equal number of nominations. It pertains to how the population that they overlap with. So that means city planning could look at, you know, the population within each of our regions, and my point here is to make sure that any changes in the regional borders is based on objective information and transparency. So maybe it would be, you know, the board should review from time to time in consultation with Department of City Planning, the borders of the regions to ensure a near equal distribution of members within those regions.
Thank you for that explanation, Sean.
Yeah, I still am uncomfortable. I still don't think it's perfect, because if all of a sudden the borough president decides that he or she is only going to appoint new members north of Avenue H, so then we go back to the drawing board, and all of a sudden our southern border for region, you know what I'm saying? Like all of a sudden we're going to draw, you know, region, there won't be a region 3 or 4 south of that, of Ditmas or whatever. And that shouldn't be on us, that, you know.
Right.
Well, if I may, I just want to jump in on that. That's an interesting consideration. I think that's a very extreme scenario. I don't think it's likely for a variety of reasons, namely because of the council districts. Some have to come from some part. There isn't a scenario currently where we have a region that could be totally left out, because each region, I believe, will coincide with a different council member's district. So there would have to be some scenario where one would come from each of the regions. But more to the point, I think, let's take the extreme. What we're doing actually guarantees representation in perhaps a more important role, which is the nominating committee. So let's just say there were some awful instinct to exclude a whole community of people because of coincidence and who lives in the southern part of the district or the northeastern part or the northwestern part. Let's just say there was a concerted effort to do that. This is ensuring that even if there were only one board member from that region, and it's highly underrepresented with the rest of the, give my timer there, highly underrepresented with the rest of the, on the board, it would still give voice to someone theoretically who would be representative of that community. Also, this language does imply that if they could alternatively, if they don't live in the district, we may even want to say if they don't live in the region, where they might have that significant interest, maybe we even say if there are no members from that region, the chair may appoint another member who would serve on that committee on behalf of that region. We could even add wording like that in. So that's something to consider there in that scenario too.
Okay. Ed, I see your hand is up.
I believe Joanne and Nikki were ahead of me.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Nikki, you wanna chime in?
Like a little bit of a non sequitur from what you guys are talking about. I feel like, first of all, reviving these committees to be more active, and then second, we're talking about like all these different reviews. I just want to ask Sean and Anya, and I would say this question stands for any edit we make, but like, is this putting too much of a burden on the staff of the community board? Like, is this realistic in terms of what you guys have the bandwidth to do? I just want to be sensitive to that we don't come up with like great idea that requires a lot more staff time than anything we did before.
Do you mean adding 4 regional committee meetings a year?
Yeah, and then also just like the things that we're putting here, like, you know, having to check in with a city department and look at the.
No, that's okay. I mean, I appreciate the sensitivity more to adding committee meetings, but as long as, you know, like we added the bylaws committee you know, to the roster this year, and that was fine. It's just if there's a bylaws committee and a census committee and the regional committee, it could add up. But I think that we have a way to put brakes on if that happens, because I don't think the language in the regional, I don't think we put any language in the regional committees that requires them to meet, but it gives us the option of adding those meetings to the mix. And I love talking to Department of City Planning, so that part's fine too.
Okay, cool. I just want to make sure we're sensitive to the staff as well, not just come up with cool ideas.
You're very kind. Thanks.
I think that's good though. I'm sure. I don't think Sean will hesitate to tell us if we think if we're doing something that will suddenly, you know, expand, you know, have to, you know, require every day on the calendar being a committee meeting. I think Sean knows to speak up in that situation. From you know, having worked on this for a little bit, which is great because you know, we should be held in check in that regard. Joanne, you have your hand up.
So I just want to circle back to the fact that when we started discussing a review of the borders of the regional committees, there was some scoffing at the fact that it is inextricably linked to the bylaws themselves. And there was a lot of vocal discourse about reviewing the bylaws again to review the regional committee. So I understand the need to protect the integrity of the process on how these lines are drawn, but linking them to the bylaws makes the process very clunky, for lack of a better word, and to the concern that while extreme, they likely will need to be reviewed, these boundaries, you know, somewhere between 3 and 5 years. So it's just my feeling that having it linked to the bylaws is going to make the process much slower and less palatable. Thank you.
So, I mean, I guess from my standpoint, and I know Ed, you have your hand up, but just want to stay on this point for a sec. From my standpoint, I don't know if we need to be, you know, revisiting the regions every so often. You know, like, you know, it's not like at least in the short term, we're not looking at, you know, high rises going up all over, you know, in some portion of the district where, you know, like there's going to be some radical change in where people are living. You know, obviously there is some degree of change, but I mean, I think what you proposed was fairly sensible, and I don't get the sense that the numbers in that are in the regions now are all that much different from, say, 5 years ago. So yeah, I'm just not sure it's something that necessarily has to be revisited 3 to 5 years. I think there's a good chance in 5 years, you know, we'd look at it and be like, you know, this still seems reasonable and fine. But do you think that because of the way in which folks are appointed, you know, we just don't know, and we might look at it and decide, oh, well, we need to make some modifications to these borders to make things a little more equitable here?
I think, you know, just considering a mechanism that's not tied to a bylaw review is what we should be thinking about, so that it can, we don't know, you know, in terms of the growth of the city, I mean, things are moving very fast. You can tell by all of the zoning text amendments that are being introduced over the summer that the city is very interested in economic development. We just don't know. And we have a new administration and we have 27 new council members coming on. I have no idea. But my point is really that, you know, linking the regional committee boundaries with the bylaws is very clunky. So that's just my suggestion.
Okay. I mean, I guess, in theory, we could take it out and then, have some other process for defining it. But I think there was pushback against that idea earlier from what I gathered. So, so maybe some others would want to chime in on that. But I know Ed has had his hand up. So, what did you want to add, Ed?
Thanks, Steve, and I hope I can articulate my 2 cents clearly. Sean, thank you for your explanation. And regional committees aside, I agree with Sean's note about the language of transparency and objectivity. We, as a community board, we play an advisory role to the borough president and city council members. So I'm curious to the general makeup of the demographics of our, even though we're appointed by the borough president, the demographics that make up this board, regardless of where we exist geographically. But I'm just wondering if there is information that we can conduct as far as like a survey that we can share with the borough president and get their commitment. Like, hey, this is where we stand. This is what our findings are. So if maybe 75% of board members are homeowners in this district versus renters, and there's just a lot of different factors that we may not be considering as far as diversity and what we consider to be diverse within our district, whether that be geographically or other makeup outside of race, gender, and so on and so forth. So I think, I feel that we should be on a fact-finding mission to discover more about ourselves and more about our neighbors, and sharing that out with the potential new the borough president, and getting their commitment to invest in the diversity of this board as well, and getting their commitment and involvement as well. So that's just my 2 cents. Thank you.
That's a good point. That would certainly seem helpful. Yeah, and I'm not sure if you were if you had any accurate statistics in mind, but I would not be surprised in the least if homeowners were overrepresented as compared to renters, compared to the overall makeup of the population of the district. Jonathan, I think you had your hand up before, which is now a check mark. I don't know how you did that, but I don't know if you still
It's a mark.
have something to say.
Yeah,
Yes.
I just wanted to address a couple of other points. We don't have to initiate a bylaws review just to change one section. I believe in the way it's structured in the bylaws right now. I don't even know if there's any tremendous talk about amendments. I don't recall it. So one could just propose, move, and second, and have the board review a bylaws amendment. So if there is something specific we want to change, 10 days notice, right? These bylaws may be amended by a majority vote of the members of the board after at least 10 calendar days written notice of the membership of the board setting forth proposed amendments. So if it ever became enough of a concern, that's the procedure to change it. And it does not, what we're going through right now is not the requirement to revise any aspect of the bylaws. So I would share certainly Joanne's concern about having to do this entire process to change one little thing. Just because our board has tended to do a holistic bylaws review every so often in the recent years, doesn't mean that we have to do it that way for any change that we specifically wish to make. The other point that I'd like to highlight is that, yes, zoning text amendments are changing and being introduced. There's going to be new council members, but that's nothing new. Our board has had this regional committee structure in for about 30 plus years, and we're all here. And we're all, look at the conversations we're having with the structure we've had in place. I mean, even with the very rigid quadrant structure that isn't necessarily reflective of the development or the population shifts from the last 30, 40 years. And here we are, and we're having these intelligent and well-considered discussions around equity and inclusion and diversity and how to ensure that. So I think, the not to sound like a broken record, but also to invoke, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I'm not saying we don't change the boundaries, but I think the more important point of altering this regional committee structure is making sure that we are being geographically representative of the communities, of the larger, broader communities that are in place now versus how they might have been in place 30, 40 years ago. I think that's a worthwhile update. I don't know that we have to change so much else about this at the moment because there doesn't seem to be a need predicated on it. We can always change it with a specific bylaws amendment later on without doing all of this over again. And again, just to keep in mind that the nominating committee is directly tied into this. So that's why I think we should be extra careful. And I do think there should be that little extra bit of effort and consensus required to make a change, knowing that it could affect how people might get elected, where it might affect that whole concept of diversity and inclusion that we want to maintain as a cornerstone principle of how our board operates in relation to the broader community. So I just want to bring up those points. I don't think we have to change much to make a meaningful change here. And I think we could certainly revisit it if and when such a time comes that says we must do something different than how it's been in place for the last 40, 50 years.
Okay. It sounds good. Thanks, Jonathan. No one else has their hand up at the moment, it looks like. So I think where we left off here, and you know, I don't know if this would satisfy the concerns that Joanne raised and what some other folks have said, but as it stands now, what we have is the board should review from time to time in consultation with the Department of City Planning, the borders of the regions, in order to ensure a reasonable distribution of board members within those regions and to ensure transparency and objectivity. So I'm open to any other proposed changes or discussions. Sean added some info in the chat. Sean, looking at.
Yeah, I don't think you have to pause on it for the purposes
Yeah.
of this section.
No, I was just skimming what you wrote. So Sean addressed, I guess, was adding some information regarding Ed's comment
Yeah.
from earlier. So any thoughts, you know, in terms of any modifications to what appears there currently at the end of the section? I just read it, so anything else we can move on, although, you know, I don't want to, you know, just prematurely jump into topical committees, although, you know, I'm sure we're all chomping at the bit to get there. Sean, did you want to say something?
Oh, just because I spoke a lot, but I think it functions well enough for us to move on to the next section if that's what you'd like to do.
Okay, I'm fine with that. So the topical committees. So I think as we discussed last time, at least quickly, Joanne did make some proposals for modifying the topical committees, but let's before we get there, I think the first part of this, you know, just topical committees, all this does is just spell out, you know, what the requirements of the topical committees are in the city charter, which, you know, I think we may as well keep just to have that as the cornerstone. I don't see a reason to cut it. I think consistent with what we said in earlier sections, we'll add a link to the city charter there, but I see no reason to get rid of the quote because I think it's good to ground us in what the city charter requires. I guess the last thing before we get into the substance of what the topical committees are going to be. So in carrying out the duties described above, each topical committee in consultation with the chairperson and the district manager shall be responsible for consulting, cooperating with and monitoring the services of the city agencies listed herein and successor agencies. I don't think there's anything to anything that's too controversial there. I think at the very least, recently, in my experience, the district manager has played a more active role in that than the chairperson, but I don't know, you know, I don't have a problem with how it reads, and I'm not proposing any changes, but I think what's there is fine, unless if someone wants to weigh in and propose any changes to that. I mean, it's kind of a some ways it's a throat clearing before we get into the topical committees anyway. I don't see any hands. So rather than going in order, I think I'll start from the back because I think what Joanne is proposing is, one, adding a housing and land use committee, and two, adding like an economic development or economic affairs committee, both of which seem to make sense, especially because Sean helpfully gathered up the city agencies that are aligned with those, and there's quite a few. And it does seem to make intuitive sense that given the importance of housing issues and economic development issues, that those issues not be overlooked, and that we have that our board is trying to take those issues into account in our meetings where we're meeting with agencies and all that. So I do think it makes sense. Certainly the economic development, I guess the housing and land use, there's the issue of, okay, so do we take out of the public hearing process the like zoning and all these proposed changes that we're used to dealing with in public hearings, and reassign that to housing and land use committee. That, I guess that's the only complication there. Because I think there's a thought like, okay, we have a housing and land use committee, but we still have the public hearings. But there's also the idea, okay, if we have a housing and land use committee, then why shouldn't that housing and land use committee be the one that weighs in on issues impacting housing and land use? So I think those are the two additions that Joanne is proposing, and then as a result, unless we want to add two committees, making 8 total topical committees, making scheduling much more difficult, we need to work on consolidating, combining, and figuring out what to do. And I think I was trying, Joanne had made a proposal, I kind of tried to do something with that, and but I think we kind of need the committee's input. But let's take it one step at a time. I guess, does anyone want to weigh in on the idea of the economic development committee, the housing committee? I see there's some hands up already. I don't know who was first. So Jonathan, you wanna start us off?
I don't mind if you want me to. Which one is going to be the economic development one? Is that going to be entailed with the housing as well? Housing land use?
So the way I currently have it is cultural affairs would be split out of, basically education, libraries, and cultural affairs would be split up. So cultural affairs would join economic development, and it would become economic development and cultural affairs, name subject to change, but that is what is currently on the table as far as that.
Okay, so I have some interesting thoughts about what this might look like. So we have a really good example of 1616 Cordelia Road, where if it were to come before a housing and land use committee, and if that was the committee that was hosting the public hearing, let's say our culture is going to change radically, that it's not going to be a free-for-all, but that the land use committee is going to review all zoning and variance and special permits. They'll have the public hearing, they'll make the recommendation to the full board. It won't be the consensus of whatever board members show up. There's going to be an implication that there is I don't know how to put it, but like a separation of concerns and an antithetical relationship between economic development and housing. And I wonder if that's something we need to consider, that we're separating economic development, which is where most of our zoning changes are going to come from, I think, because they're going to be directly tied to housing, and we like to actually, at the very least, merge the two and make sure that they're offsetting each other in a positive way for everyone in the community. So I want to bring up the fact that we're separating those out when in fact economic development is going to be a pretty big driver of some of the other zoning changes that we're more likely to come across. Now, with that said, I think my bigger question right now is, how is this going to change the process? If everything land use, which is city planning, I mean, everything is city planning and Board of Standards and Appeals, which I don't know if we put that in there specifically, but
I didn't add that, but I can.
But if that's the case, then is that going to change our overall culture and process? Which is, I'm fine. I think we do need better structure, but I think we should have a very honest conversation right now that if we're doing this committee, that it's not going to be just sort of a forum to hear about zoning matters, but it's actually going to maybe take over this process in a more structured way with clearer idea of who's going to participate, who's assigned, and that these matters are going to be reviewed by this committee rather than whatever board member shows up. And then aligning that with any quorum requirements we might have with public hearings for land use matters that the law requires us to have. So I kind of wanted to throw that part out there. And then I did want to highlight the tension between economic development and housing if we're going to choose one versus the other when it comes to land use.
Thanks.
So I don't mean to bust into this conversation.
No, go for it.
But I feel like, we're talking about this without actually having an introduction about what my thought process was, number one.
Go for it.
And number two is that I've never been a proponent of having special permits and private site zoning changes be done in this committee. Those should still be done in a public hearing because the optics are better. The public sees the word public hearing for special permits and for site rezoning, and it feels better. So I do not think that the purview of this committee, Housing and Land Use, should be to hear special permits and site zoning changes. That's the first thing.
Joanne, did you want to talk some more about your thought process?
So, the Lunch and Learn is a really good example of how I see zoning integrating into the process. So we have had all of these amazing presentations from all of these groups that can teach us and guide the community and the board, and have some real segue into what are real projects that are going on as examples within this committee, right? So we have Housing Preservation and Development, we have DCP, we have all of these other CBOs that have really amazing social and institutional knowledge. And again, is a forum, these committees have always been a forum for discussion about resources and about district issues, right? So just focusing on this particular committee, that's my opinion. The others, I would just need to hear from Jonathan, because you have the most experience with youth services, whether you think that youth services can carry the other two components. For the most part, youth services, according to the data that Sean sent today, youth services is pretty much silent after the youth conference. So it is possible that, and you've had an exceptionally large amount of meetings in a short period of time this year because we were doing a virtual conference. That's not usually the norm. We had 5 this year. Last year we had 4. And then the year before that, surprisingly, we only had 1 youth services committee. We have to look at that data again. That was 2019. I think we had more. So, going to, transportation has been very quiet in 2020 and 2021. And some of that has to do with the way in which the Department of Transportation is dealing with their projects. They basically come in and they're more informative than asking for opinion. So that was my thought process between adding community, environment, and transportation. They sort of work together. What else? So I guess on the table here is to figure out whether you think youth services can absorb education and libraries. Jonathan, from your past experience with that committee, and then understanding whether or not community environment can absorb transportation, and then coming to some kind of consensus of how we want the public to engage with the community board on these special permits and with site-specific zoning changes. I'm all set. Thanks.
Thanks. Jonathan, I know Nikki has her hand up, but Jonathan, do you want to weigh in on Joanne's question as to youth services? I mean, I think I was the one who originally proposed doing that combination. I just think it makes sense. At the very least, education and youth services seem connected. Libraries doesn't seem like a very far-fetched that be thrown in there too. So I guess I was trying, and also I was one of the co-chairs for education, libraries, and cultural affairs, and it just seemed a little disparate. I feel like it's a little more organized lines. So that was at least my thought process there.
So I'm trying to remember how far back the neighborhood advisory boards existed and when they started relative to the community development block grants. I'm trying to think, because I do sort of believe that youth services may have played a stronger role in that process, and over the years it sort of waned because separate entities are weighing in on the on those community development block grants. So and I'll just go holistically, one of the key things that I think a lot of the committees aren't doing right now that I think could be done in a more intentional way is use the year to not only provide information to the community, but also to really craft what their capital and expense budget priorities should be, and use those committee meetings as a way to do that. So that was something youth services was doing. We were trying to do it, as often as we were capable of doing it, to review the agencies in our purview and to craft those so that by the time the budget committee meetings came in the fall, we would have our list of priorities of things that they've talked about, things that we wanted, things that we talked about with the community members that showed up to our committee meetings, and make sure they get incorporated. So I think holistically overall, I think all the committees should be focusing on keeping that in mind. Like, hey, when October comes or September comes, what budget priorities are we going to recommend, and what do we want to highlight in the district needs statement over the summer? So I do think that that's one thing. Now, that was something youth services was doing in concert with the youth conference. In recent years, for a variety of reasons, it just wasn't really possible to focus on that, but that was sort of the intention. It wasn't that the youth services committee was only going to be the youth conference, but of course, because that is such an important program, that's why it has tended to, more than not, just been about meeting for the youth conference. So that's my thought on that. In terms of lumping in the other youth-related concerns, I think that makes a lot of sense. I don't know how all the board members who have been used to leading these committees and that structure, I don't know if there's buy-in on such a structural change, but I do think that topically it makes a ton of sense. And I would support bringing all those concerns into one area. And I do think it would make better use of those who are interested in youth-related issues and serving the young people of our district. I do think that would be a wise move to consolidate. And I'll just say, lastly, related to land use, I do think that we need to. I think we need to consider exactly how. If I think we just have to consider that committee is going to be given purview over all the actions that agency is going to take, and the fact that our public hearing process can occur as is, but then it still leads the question about does the land use committee review anything to make a recommendation before the board? I mean, I do think we have to clarify that language, because if that's not the intention, certainly someone later on can read this and say, oh yeah, we have a land use committee. They're going to handle all the zoning issues that come up. And, you know, we're kind of leaving it to culture and custom alone. And I don't know if that's such a great idea to do. I think if we want to structure this carefully as a new feature to our board's committee portfolio, I think we should be very clear about what role we really want it to have, and maybe also be clearer about the role or whose role it is to host the public hearings for land use matters, who is supposed to make the recommendation to the board, and either encapsulate the process we have currently or clearly define who it belongs to going forward. So.
Thanks. Oh, getting back to a point you made earlier, I think if there's something regarding a rezoning that has obvious, economic, implications, like the Cortelia Road development, there's not, we always have, we regularly have joint committee meetings. So I don't necessarily think, not all economic issues are housing, and obviously not all housing issues are economic. So I think, even looking just the number of agencies that deal with each that deal with each side, that deal with economic and deal with housing, I think it does make sense to keep them separate. And I think there's probably enough there to keep them separate. And I think they're, in terms of economic development in the district versus housing development, I think those are things conceptually that people usually keep separate. I do recognize, your example as being a relevant one where they'd be combined. But yeah, I think having, in the example you mentioned, I think that would be an appropriate instance, assuming these two committees would be added going forward, that would be something that could be handled jointly. But also I wanted to, Nikki's patiently had her hand up, so I wanted to get to Nikki.
All right, hopefully I can organize my thoughts. I've been stacking up opinions as you guys talked. So, okay, my first thing is just a clarifying question. How many committees do we have right now? And after these proposed change, how many committees would we have?
So right now we have 6.
And we would go to 8.
We were trying to figure out how to get down, to combine. Right now it's 7 in this proposed, reassigning education and libraries to youth and cultural affairs to economic development. So I did want to ask Sean if, having 7 topical committees would be sustainable, or if we should really try to stick with 6.
Before Sean responds, I'll say, I think as a member who likes to attend other committee meetings, I would rather have 6, just because it's even for me, and I'm not anywhere near the most active person here, it's a lot to try and attend that many committee meetings, or even just a potpourri of that many. So I would definitely advocate for trying to consolidate. And I have my specific recommendation. I can only speak to the 2 committees that I've really been active in. I'm not a member of the Youth Services Committee, but I like the suggestion. I do think that the Youth Services agenda the rest of the year can accommodate other things, and then it can become less focused on the event. And I think that additional content will actually make the event better. I think it will change what the conversation around the event is, which many times can be quite logistical, and instead it might be a little bit more, I don't want to say theoretical or academic, but a little richer. So I think that's a good idea. And then I am a committee member for community environment. And I feel like at some point, maybe I imagine this, there had been a proposal to fold the community environment committee into the housing and land use topic. And I loved that idea. I think, no offense to my fellow committee members, it's way too quiet of a committee. It could take a lot more content, and I would like to see it. And I thought that was a really nice combination of topics. So I'm not, maybe there's a reason that was not where this ended up, but I 100% think community environment could go into housing and land use. And then I have a question. I see Department of Homeless Services end up twice. I don't know where it is, but I think it definitely doesn't belong in community safety, because I feel like that has connotations that I don't love. So, but those are just my thoughts.
Yeah, and I did flag homeless services as like, should we list it as both? Just because like with when there's community safety issues, they're you know that it is a department that does get involved. But I'm I'm happy to pull it out, and I did want to flag it as something to raise. And I do your point is well taken. So
But actually, if we aren't forced to make an either or choice, I thought it was an either or. I thought it was like you have to choose which committee gets to talk to that department. So then actually I can see the practical reason. And then wait, one last thing. Sorry, just because you guys were saying a lot of interesting stuff while I had my hand up. The vibe at the lunch and learns is so awesome. So Joanne, your point about your original intent and like your sort of vision and where your thinking can come from, anything that we can do with these committees that can bring the vibe that's in the lunch and learns around land use to other stuff would be great. I have learned a lot from both the recordings and the live sessions. So I just think that's the spirit of those is awesome. And I would love to see that spread around other committees and how we treat that topic in general as this community board.
So I actually did think that that the community environment going with housing would make sense. But at least the initial feedback I got was it would be too much. But I guess one thought I had is maybe what if we, and maybe this is a non-starter, but what if we took land use out of just make it housing and community environment, and then land use is like the public session domain. What if we did something like that? I don't know. Some hands just shot up. I see Sean's hand is up.
So I'll work backward. First of all, I like that idea a lot, and I like naming things. So we could think about what to take land use out, and if Joanne objects, that's fine too. I don't feel strongly, but I do think that there's some merit in calling it the housing community and built environment, or the housing community environment and public space committee, or something that broadens the committee name to encompass all of this. And since land use is sort of the loaded indicator, maybe it helps, and then it also helps us kind of explain why land use items aren't on the land use committee. So just I'd like the committee to dwell on that one. I think it's a good thought to consider. And then to go back to your original question about whether 7 committees is too many, it doesn't really matter how many committees there are. It matters how many committee meetings there are. So if this seems, I've expressed this a couple of times, and I'm just wrestling with it a little bit. This committee that we're sort of impregnating could end up like meeting. If this committee has to meet every single month in order to get through the agenda that's sort of being hoisted on it, it's still only one committee, but it's meeting a whole lot more than it did. So it just feels like a daunting committee, this particular one. I don't know if there's any better way to slice it up, though. So the other committees might start feeling like this is the committee that's getting all the, they're the ones having all the fun, and we only meet 3 times a year. So that's my concern with it.
Gotcha. And well, I probably got ahead of myself in trying to combine them. The suggestion that Joanne had made was combining transportation and community environment. I guess my concern with it, if that's where we come out, that's fine. It just seemed like to me that they were just kind of disparate topics, and people, I didn't think it, I didn't think that folks interested in the community environment issues would necessarily be interested in the transportation issues, or vice versa. It just seemed like things to separate. It just seemed from a topical standpoint, community environment went a little better with the housing and public space issues. But if it's too much to have in one committee, we can figure something else out. Carl, you have your hand up.
Yeah. So yeah, this is a robust conversation as usual, and so to piggyback off of Sean's point about the naming, I just wanted to know, since we're focused on well, we're looking at F, right, and possible, I guess, iterations of that. My question is, for us as a committee and a community, what is our definition of housing, community environment, and land use in public space? Right, like I'm not saying, you know, we need one in the bylaws, right? I'm not talking that regimented, but I'm just wondering, these are committees that we've been attending for years, but do we have a shared understanding of what we entail this to mean?
Well, you know, I guess, you know, we can name them however we want to name them, and I guess, you know, I guess the topics kind of derive from the agencies, and I guess, you know, the co-chairs in consultation with the chair and Sean in terms of, you know, figuring out, you know, what topics to the committee will discuss. So, you know, I think in terms of names, in terms of the naming, you know, we obviously have some flexibility now that we're revisiting. But I mean, did you want to propose something else, or you just wanted to open up discussion in terms of, you know, what things mean?
I just wanted to open it up, I guess. Yeah, I just wanted to open up in terms of what they mean, because I do believe that, yeah, you know, depending on what you view in a name, then that colors your perception of what the conversation will be about, right? Like, there's a universe of people who consider public safety a part of community environment. But for us, we have them as two distinct entities, right? Like, Steve Plosker is looking at crime stats and Donald is looking at the dog park, right? And a bunch of other things. Whereas there are people for whom those would be one and the same. And so when we talk about housing, community environment, and public space, you know, I'm wondering, we clearly can't answer all those questions in one meeting, but I'm just wondering, you know, as we put these together, whatever we decide today, you know, before we start the next year, I think we should at least make sure that whoever is going to be heading these committees, whether it's one person or co-chairs, that they have a shared understanding of what that language means. Because then I think that would help them, you know, for those meetings for that year. At least it's a way of setting expectations that, hey, I as the chair or we as the co-chair, this is the committee that we are heading, and then, you know, this is how we interpret this in the realm of CB 14. So that's where I was going with that.
Okay, I gotcha. Thanks. Jonathan, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think maybe we're missing an opportunity here to kind of fill in the blanks of what we were talking about with the regional committees. We could just assign the land use functions to the regional committees. I mean, if we want these people to be the eyes and ears, and if we want these people to take a proactive role and be sort of the ambassadors of city government in their particular region, I don't see why we don't fold the ideas of the land use functions that were envisioned, that, you know, Joanne's initial conception of this committee, why we don't just assign that to the regional committees. And like we said, we can have joint committee meetings. We could have regions 1 through 4, and you could do the zoning talk, and we could do it that way. And we're actually, you know, once again, adding a little bit more heft to the concept that the board members that represent a region actually really have to think hard and work hard about their particular region. And so land use items, zoning matters, it would fall in their purview. Whether the public hearing happens that way or not is irrelevant. I think just the idea that the land use function should be governed primarily by those individuals who live and represent that region, I think that might be a way to solve that problem. And then you can have housing and community environment, or maybe even economic development merged in together, right? Because those are all going to be implicated. Anyway, I'm just suggesting that the land use functions that have been assigned to that committee proposal could simply be assigned to the regional committees. And that would be my proposal as a way to maybe address all those concerns.
Okay, I hear you. Joanne, you have your hand up.
So maybe I just haven't been clear enough about how I vision committees. So I think the two committees, Youth Services and Human Services, are the most proactive and the ones I think bring the community the most value. And why? Because they both have some kind of fair or event that brings the community together or brings their partners together, and they work together, right? Human Services has the nonprofit roundtable. Youth Services has the youth committee. So I envision that for all of the committees, right? Every committee should have some small event that brings together agency and community, or agency and other partners together. So housing, there is so much that could be done with a housing fair. Taking land use, listen, I was never, ever a fan about having a land use committee, but it just seems like right now, considering the issues that we had with previous developments in the last year, that it is important that we have a venue that the community and board members can get together and become further educated. There is never enough education on land use. I don't see the land use committee at all presiding over permits or special permits or site-specific zoning. I see it as an educational tool. I see it as a committee where we can have presentations with partners that can further educate. And if we've educated somebody for 1 year, it doesn't mean that there isn't a new cohort in year 2 or year 3. However we want to integrate that, that's fine. I don't see that happening with the regional committees. And that's basically all I have to say about that.
That makes sense. Okay. And I think one thing that hasn't come up yet, I think in discussing the Public Safety Committee, Sean had suggested maybe making it public and community safety. I think I went even further here and proposed just making it community safety, just to kind of not be solely about, police. And we expanded the agencies, fire departments there, DA, New York City Emergency Management, Office for Prevention of Hate Crimes. So I don't know if there's any input on that. And I guess, the other thing is, it sounds like aside from the, figuring out the mechanics of, just making it clear that we would take we would keep the public hearing process, notwithstanding, the addition of the Housing and Land Use Committee, or Housing, Community Environment and Land Use Committee. We just have to, describe those mechanics somewhere, that, the public hearing process continues, notwithstanding that we have this committee set up, and maybe, figure out what to do to, public hearing, and have the land use, the Housing and Land Use Committee members are all expected to attend. I don't know. We can figure something out. But but I think the main other thing was, making a decision as to where community environment goes, if it should go in there, notwithstanding that it's, packed house, no pun intended, or if we do want to combine transportation or community environment, or if someone has some other suggestion, or if we want to have 7 topical committees for 50 members. So rather than averaging 8 or 9 people, we'd be down to a little over 7. And, conceivably there might be a committee where only a handful of people want to join, the more we add, especially because I think there will be a lot of interest in the Economic Committee and the Housing Committee. So that could lower the interest in some of our current committees. But that's what I'm thinking. But Glenn, you have your hand up, and it's the first time I think we've waited an hour to hear Glenn weigh in. So I'm sure Glenn has lots of thoughts. What's up, Glenn?
Well, thank you. No, just a few general ones. One is, I like the idea of keeping the number of committees at 6. It's hard to get significant numbers of people to show up for them. So to add additional committees just thins it out even further. I don't know if that's beneficial. I like a lot of what Joanne is saying very much. I really like the idea of more committees being proactive as opposed to reactive, to try to do more to help the community at large. So that focus I like a great deal. Those are general statements. The only other statement I have is you've got so much red here written out. I can't make heads or tails of it. What we had before, you'd say things like and related agencies. That's all we really needed to know. We don't need to write down every single conceivable agency that each committee might interact with. The focus should be more on how the committees can be more proactive. And then I think Sean could help a great deal in terms of how you group these ideas, because she has the best idea of what comes up a lot, so that we don't have 2 or 3 committees that are very, very busy and 3 committees that are relatively not busy, so that things can be grouped in a way that the load is more evenly shared. That's the only comments that I have. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Glenn. So I saw Nikki's comment and Sean's comment in the chat. Sean, could you clarify your first sentence? Transportation makes sense in the community environment, etc. committee. Are you saying transportation ties into housing and community environment as well? Or am I misunderstanding?
Yeah, no, and in terms of land use and how we I think also where we build housing drives where we have transportation, or maybe it's more the other way, where we have transportation drives where we build housing. So I mean, I'm just like arguing against myself now, but it's just where it seems to fit in. But it doesn't do anything to Glenn's point in terms of whether or not we have an equal distribution of each of these committees to meet throughout the year. But I also don't know if that matters. I raised it and then there are things that we can do to try to even it out, or just accept the fact that some committees meet more than others. It used to be that transportation met all the time. So
yeah, and
then I just added that maybe co-chairs could sort of specialize within their committees. If there are sort of a whole bunch of things that are related but also different thrown in, maybe the co-chairs could figure out how they wanted to divvy it up so each one came at their specialization with a little bit of background and can focus on it.
Well, if I
Right.
might, it's not just about how often committees meet, but if certain committees have much more on their plate just by the nature of the combining, then it probably would make sense that more people were assigned to those committees, not just that they met more often. So the more that it balances out, the easier it becomes, or not. Or you can say, okay, this committee is just going to meet a lot more often, and we're going to assign more people to it. That's okay. But that's a form of balance, right? By making sure there's enough people to handle the extra workload. That's it. Thank you.
I mean, in general, the requirement is that the topical committees meet at least 3 times a year. Are at least in our current committee formation, or a lot of committees going above three per community board year? Sean?
Bylaws did.
Well, topical committees.
And youth services does. There have been years where transportation does. There's been years when community environment does. And I think, Joanne, the way I didn't do a perfect job of counting every committee meeting over the past few years, but Joanne, I think you counted them by calendar year. So you just did 2019 instead of from September to June, is why those numbers seemed a little bit off. But
oh, I see why we had 2018 in there now. Okay, I can readjust the numbers. I'll recalculate the frequency.
But I think because I think that we've been bylaw compliant in getting at least 3 for all of them. But to be honest, there have been times where we sort of have to scare up an agenda to make that committee meeting happen. There's nothing really happening that we have to respond to. We just sort of like go through our list. Anya has a great system for just keeping emails that people wanted to present this or that or the other thing to us, and we'll go through that list and see who we haven't heard from, who still might want to present. So sometimes we force the meeting forward and we don't really have to have it.
Okay. That's helpful. Yeah, I still lean towards putting community environment in with housing. I could see community environment combined with transportation, but again, I just think they're, you know, I even though there's not many transportation related agencies, you know, I feel like issues regarding like bus lanes and bike lanes and traffic and, you know, being car friendly and all those issues, you know, that they're always, you know, interest of the community. And it just seems to me like, you know, adding sanitation or parks to that, it just seems odd to me. Like the folks who really, you know, are like gung ho about bike lanes and bus lanes, I don't necessarily see as being this folks who are gung ho about the other stuff and vice versa. I mean, obviously there's folks on the board who are into everything, but so maybe I'm wrong. But yeah, I do kind of think community environment belongs with housing and land use is my inclination. And you know, if it's too packed of an agenda, then you know, we can figure out something later. Or you know, it seems like no one wants to make 7 topical committees, and I think I'm on board with that. And but if anyone else has any other proposals, oh, the one other thing I wanted to mention, Joanne's point about each committee having some sort of event, and I guess it, at least to me, like I'm not sure what I think it would be maybe a little more difficult for some of these committees. But I think the economic committee and the housing committee could certainly have their some sort of annual event. I think maybe the safety and transportation, you know, it's doable. It just seems like we'd have to be a little more creative as to what those events would be. But that does, I think that is a good idea because it, you know, I think having that event, you know, just kind of showcases the importance of the committee and, you know, leads to more interaction with the community, which is great. And I think, you know, actually for the Education, Library and Cultural Affairs Committee, Carl and I, you know, from the beginning were like, oh, can we have some sort of, you know, education event? You know, so we were thinking, you know, by coincidence, we were thinking along those lines for the ELCA committee as well, having some, you know, event about, you know, local education opportunities and possibilities to educate the community. So, you know, I mean, we could, you know, if we really wanted to be ambitious, add something to the bylaws about having some annual event for each committee. But I don't know if we want to go there and add to our plate. Okay. Let me see. I see Sean had a comment. Thank you, Sean. I don't see any other hands up. In regard to Glenn's comment about listing the agencies, I don't think it hurts to be over inclusive, and you know, I think you know, just having, especially because if we need to fill, you know, topics or that sort of thing, I think it helps to give the district office and give the co-chairs of the committees, you know, ideas for like, okay, what can we include here? Who can we reach out to? So I don't think, you know, I do appreciate at the moment that it adds to the read in the document, but if that's all added, it will not be read forever. And, you know, it's just, I don't think the over inclusiveness hurts. And I think it's good that we add more agencies to have a little more grounding for what each of these committees would deal with. Okay. So there's so much here that I don't know if I can read it all out. Oh, I guess no one said anything about changing public safety to community safety. So unless if someone wants to weigh in there, I'll leave that as is. So I don't think I need to spell out every agency, but I think what we currently have now is youth services, education, and libraries would be the first committee. So education and libraries would come over. Yeah, the agencies are what they're. I added ACS. I'm not sure if anyone if ACS belongs there, but for human services, I'm actually in response to Nikki's comment. Sean had a comment that Department of Homeless Services more properly belongs under human services, so I moved that there. A lot of the other additions were based on an email Sean sent prior to the meeting. Then changing public safety to community safety, adding some agencies there. Transportation stays as is, basically. Community environment gets folded into the housing, community environment, and land use, and economic development and cultural affairs. So basically, cultural affairs just gets pulled out of ELCA and put in with economic development. Didn't sound like anyone had any issues with that. I think there's enough of a synergy there. But basically, the agencies are all economic related. I think I took everything that Sean listed. Yeah. Someone want to chime in? Okay. I think I added Department of Small Business Services. That might have been the only one. And then housing, community environment, and land use. I added Board of Standards and Appeals based on what Jonathan mentioned. So yeah, that's how we have it. Anyone else want to add anything before we move on to the next section?
I do, Steve. Sorry, but
Oh,
at the top, before you get into enumerating the committees themselves, there's the paragraph that begins in carrying out the duties described above each topical committee. And I may have missed this when you went through it before we started the committee talking about the committees themselves, but it says the bottom line says, and monitoring the services of the city agencies listed herein. And I'm worried that limits us to those that are listed, even though we're expanding that list. So I think we need to open that language up.
Okay.
You could say city agencies, including but not limited to.
Okay. Yep. Yeah, that's fine.
Thanks.
I think we tried to have a catch-all and all of them, basically saying all other agencies, but I don't think that hurts. Sorry, one more time. The services of the city agencies, including but not limited to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. And successor agencies. Okay. No other hands, I don't think. Nope. Okay. All right. So let's move on to the next part. I did reorder this next part a little bit because it seemed like some of the items pertains to the topical committees, and so I tried to basically just reorder some stuff and combine where I thought appropriate. So it might be a little easier to see without the red lines for me to read it. So let me take off the red lines for now. So for number 3, what I'm proposing, and this is basically, like I said, it's just a consolidation of different things that were already in there, I believe. Maybe cleaning up the language a little bit. Annually, the chairperson shall poll board members for their topical committee preferences. The chairperson shall staff the topical committees, giving consideration to the members' choices. The chairperson shall notify members of their committee assignments prior to the October board meeting. Each board member shall officially serve on one topical committee but all board members may attend and vote at all topical committees regardless of their committee assignment. I think all of that was already in there. Yeah, I think that was all included, just in different parts of this section. Yeah. So any comments on anything there? I can go back to showing the red lines, though, again, because it's pulling from different parts, it's a little hard to see. Okay. So that's 3 in that section. And then I'll go back to the so the next one, without the red lines again. The board shall encourage the participation. So this is about the non-board members. The board shall encourage the participation of public non-board members on topical committees. Public members shall be appointed to topical committees by the chairperson in consultation with the topical committee chairs. No more than 3 public members may serve on each topical committee, nor may the public membership of any committee exceed 1/3 of that committee's total membership. A public member may serve on only 1 topical committee. I don't, you know, I don't know if we want to spend time on this, but I was wondering if we should cut that, nor may the public membership of any committee exceed 1/3 of that committee's total membership, just because it seems to dissuade unnecessarily public member, non-board members from joining. I think already having only 3 that can join, that means like 18 in total. I mean, even if it's a small committee, I don't know what the concern would be with, non-board members having a substantial number on a committee. I don't think that, hurts us or hurts the board or hurts the committee in any way. So I don't know if anyone, I mean, obviously, we only had one non-board member, I believe, this year. I don't know the extent to which it's occurred in the past, but
Yeah.
I didn't think the 1/3 limitation, I didn't understand why it was there. I don't know what the order of the hands were, so I'm just gonna guess. Carl, you have your hand up?
Yeah, so basically, out of curiosity, I was wondering if maybe either you or Jonathan or, someone else knew what the history is behind that statement, because I was confused too by that sentence.
I did not
putting in
ask.
a specific quota, I was wondering if there's a reason behind that sentence.
I did not ask, and Jonathan and Glenn both have their hands up, so I don't know if either of you can weigh in on the aspect of non-board member public members.
Sure. If an issue comes up that is somewhat controversial, a group of people could volunteer for a committee and stack the committee and control the committee. By limiting it to 1/3, it's not possible for the community at large or any particular group of people to take control of the committee. That was the whole idea. Now, we've had very few of the public who have been interested in being active members of a committee, so it's unlikely to be an issue. But it is possible that an issue will arise that people feel very strongly about, and if they think they can put 5 or 6 people on a committee and therefore control the committee, well, this one sentence prevents that. I believe that was the thinking of that when it was put in there.
Okay, thank you, Glenn.
Thanks, Glenn. Jonathan, do you have anything to add to that?
I totally agree with that. That's a big part of it. I would also caution the fact that though we haven't had too many massive events like that, but Community Board 6 did review what is now Barclay Center. And that was highly controversial. And the borough president weighed in very heavily on that and didn't like the fact that the board didn't like it. And since the appointment of the committee chairs happens at a different time than the election of the chair and the executive committee members, yeah, you could definitely stack a committee for very political reasons with public members who are not board members. So I think the intentionality here is just to make sure the board members who are appointed to serve are the preponderance of the membership on any of those committees, and they can't be outvoted by public members who can be added after the fact, who are not vetted through the normal appointment process. And there could be lots of reasons why that might happen, and we got to think of the bad reasons as much as we might think of the good reasons to do it.
Okay. Points well taken. Okay, with that clarity, I'll drop my issue with that. And it doesn't seem like anyone else had any other comments. So with that, I guess we can presumably move forward to the next one. I think we should probably go maybe another 10 minutes because I do want to save time for one thing to address before we wrap. No markup. Okay. So the next one, I think this is pulled from multiple places as well. Topical committees shall meet at least 3 times a year. Members are expected to attend all meetings of topical committees to which they are assigned. Each topical committee shall have its chair or one of its co-chairs, chair, let's just say chair or co-chairs, provide a report at the board's next monthly meeting. Jonathan, you have your hand up. Is it still from before?
That's from before, yeah.
Okay. Anne, you have your hand up. I see you here twice, Anne, but one of you has a hand up. Anne? I can't hear you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you. Thanks.
I'm really struggling. I tried calling in. I'm so sorry to have been late. I bounced in and out a couple times. Anyway, on the last section, I was under the impression that non-board members who attend a meeting may be able to include their input in an advisory role, but do not have a vote in the committee. And something that was said a moment ago, recognizing it's blinking in and out, made me put in the chat, do non-board members on any have an advisory role only, or do they have a voting role on any committee?
Well, I think the non-board members who are appointed to topical committees do have a role, is my understanding.
A role or a voting role? Do they have a vote or are they advisory? I guess is my question. In terms of being overwhelmed.
Well, I think they're considered committee members. So if there's a vote in the committee, then they're committee members. So I think
that's right, Steve. Public members of committees can vote in the committee, which committees don't tend to vote. They tend to build consensus instead. But either way, they either inform consensus or they vote on the committee recommendation that comes out to the full board. At the full board meeting, those public members do not have a vote.
Thank you, Sean.
Thanks for clarifying that, Anne. Okay. All right. So I added, because I don't think it was in here, or at least it wasn't in this section, because we do have a legal advisory committee. It's on the website. I'm on it, although I don't think it hasn't met since I've been on it, as far as I know. So I just kind of made up something from scratch in terms of what that committee is and who's on it, just out of nothing, because I don't think there was anything here about it, since we have been referencing it in our committee list. I think, though, I do need to change this to D instead of 6, so I'll do that. But legal advisory committee shall consist of board members or attorneys or other legal professionals and shall meet as needed to address any legal issues that warrant the board's attention. For this one, I could definitely use some guidance as far as what, and maybe from Sean, from Glenn, from Jonathan, from anyone else who knows regarding, you know, what we want to say about the legal advisory committee. I assume we want to say something because one exists. So I don't know if any. Yeah, Sean.
I mean, I think it speaks for itself. I mean, it's any legal issues that warrant the board's attention, and there just haven't been, thankfully, so many legal issues that have. But if we were perhaps in Community District 9, I know has wrangled with some legal issues, and maybe so maybe they have a committee that operates to try to address some of those. I think that there have been boards that have been involved on the periphery of some Article 78 suits. And so maybe a community board legal committee would want to talk about, you know, the roles that the community board can and can't play in those communities. So if you want to sort of underscore meet as needed and change it to, or, you know, make that more clear, meet if it becomes necessary or something like that, do it. And I can't remember, I feel like the legal committee met once since I've been DM, but I don't even remember what it was about, so it couldn't have been too controversial.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying that. Anne, did you have something regarding this? Trying to find Anne in my. I can't tell if that was Anne's hand from before. Okay, she lowered it. Okay. So if no one has anything to add, the legal advisory committee shall consist of board members who are attorneys or other legal professionals and shall meet if it becomes necessary to address any legal issues that warrant the board's attention. I don't see any hands, so I also added something about the committee on the whole. I think this was actually something that Anne, I could be misremembering. I thought it was Anne, or could have been someone else who said, maybe it was more than one person, who said that maybe we should have something about committee on the whole, since we do it every June. You know, should we have some mechanism in here that makes it more automatic? I kind of took a stance in the middle where, you know, kind of just specifying what the process that's been happening since I've been on the board. So I just put each June, chair shall appoint a committee on the whole that will meet as needed during the summer to act in place of the full board if warranted. I don't even know if that is accurate, but I just wanted to get something going there. So I don't know if Anne or anyone else. Yes.
Yeah. So a committee of the whole is sort of a strange little parliamentary maneuver. The board cannot meet because it is not in session. The committee of the whole is the concept that you're authorizing the full board membership to meet as an ad hoc committee. So there's no appointment. It is authorizing the chair to convene a committee of the whole, which is the mechanism. You're supposed to have a vote to say, we would like to go into a committee of the whole session. And that's the point. So the idea is that you're allowing the chair to essentially, the board is authorizing each June by vote to allow the chair to call a committee of the whole, if necessary, to address any matter that may come before the board when the board is not in session, to take action that then must be ratified at the September meeting, or essentially the next full board meeting. And so that's the mechanism of it. So if we want to dispense with this and just make it an automatic authorization, that is certainly something that we can do. It should just be reflected that when the board is not in session, the chair is authorized to convene a committee of the whole. Let me see if I can find the exact wording in Robert's rules for you, but something to that effect, in order to address matters that may come before the board or may concern the board when it is not in session, to take action that then is ratified at the next regular board meeting when the board is in session. Which I know that was a whole mouthful. But
no, that's helpful. Okay, but that clarified, because I wasn't sure exactly how to word it in the back end. So ratified at the next session of the full board of the board in September, I guess. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. Oh, Sean, you have your hand up?
Yeah, because I'm looking for it. There's also some language in when there is some language about the executive committee can meet if it needs to meet on behalf of the full board if there's an emergency, but then its actions, I'm looking for it. Then whatever that language is, I thought should just be cut and paste into here so that the actions of the committee of the whole just can't be anathema to a previously stated board position and has to be ratified at the next board meeting. And if it isn't, the action has to cease and desist. I'll
Okay.
find out where it is, but I just
Yeah, no,
thought
I see it. It's
Okay.
6B. Yeah. Okay.
What is the standard wording that we've been using in June? I know we have that scripted. I don't know if that would help because it's probably consistent with Robert's rules if I remember correctly.
Yeah, we can look that up and I can have it ready for the next bylaws committee meeting so that it mimics, so that it, echoes. I don't think I could put my hands on it from my home computer though.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll bring over that language. Yeah, and we can pick up here next time. Because I think I wanted to stop around now anyway. Because I think the one lingering, or at least in my head, the one lingering question is the extent to which we want to keep this committee meeting over the summer. So I just wanted, I don't know if folks, have summer plans, want to take, not spend, 2 hours on their summer weeknights here and there discussing bylaws. I'm open either way. I can do it. I cannot do it. I think, obviously in an ideal world, it would be nice to not have the bylaws come in the middle of the year, where we're making modifications to topical committees potentially. But I think we're we are where we are, and we obviously need a little more time, and at least probably we're finishing off 6, got 7, which is long, and then 8, 9, and 10, fortunately, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 are much shorter. So hopefully we can breeze through those. But I think it's going to be at least another 2 meetings, probably 3 minimum. So yeah, if anyone has any, I see Ed is happy to convene over summer months. Don't see Jonathan. Well, I don't, Jonathan, I guess you're a special case. You're kind of like, whenever you want to be here.
Well, I have a thought about the process here because realistically, even when we did this last time in like 2015-ish, 2016, it got kicked back. I don't think it's realistic to assume that these bylaws would be ready and everyone's going to sign off on them by September or October, the latest. There was kickback. I think a lot of people are going to be surprised by how extensive these changes are. I don't think it's going to go as smoothly as everyone would want. I could be wrong, but in the past that hasn't been the case. So I think we should assume that a fair amount of the committee changes may not be able to take effect immediately during the beginning of the next session of the board. That's going to have to be something that's rolled out. It's not inconceivable that it may take time to find people to serve in those new committees once everyone understands them. So it might be, and God willing, Joanne's second term as chair, where that's going to go into full swing. So I think we should just assume that could be the case. So I don't know if it is imperative to rush the remaining parts over the summer, although it certainly doesn't hurt to kick off the year with the discussion, knowing that it may take still a few months to get to a place where there's consensus to adopt them. But I don't think we should assume that it's going to really be possible for the board to put this into effect at the beginning of September or at the beginning of October. I do think it might take a little bit more time to get everyone on board. So with that caveat, just maybe keep that in mind, because yes, I'm a regular member of the community now. But maybe keep that in mind in terms of the timing and how much everyone wants to put into it over the summer months.
That's helpful. And I didn't mean to imply that, like, if we, met, a bunch of times in July, we would finish it off and, present in September and no problem, you know, we're all set to go and we can, you know, have new committees and, you know, everything's hunky dory. Yeah, I didn't mean to imply that I, you know, had such thoughts. So, but thanks for clarifying that. And you know, adding a dose of realism as to, you know, how this is going to play out. But you know, we'll see what happens. Sean, you have your hand up. I guess you have an interest in how this is scheduled over the summer.
Well, I mean, as long as they remain virtual like this, then you can. I think it will be easy to fit one in July and one in August. And if you want to do even 3 over the summer, I think we can figure it out. So this is, you know, this is a chipper. We got to chip away. And so the more that people are willing to do it over the summer, and we just puts us that much further ahead to move into the possible scenario that Jonathan just described.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. And, you know, some folks have put in the chat, they're happy to convene. And, you know, even if, you know, we don't have, you know, near full attendance, you know, these meetings are recorded so folks can catch up on what they missed. And, you know, each time I'm including the red lines from before and sending them out. So, and you know, we haven't had issues where someone didn't show up to a prior meeting and, you know, shows up to the next meeting and says, oh, you know, let's revisit, you know, X, Y, and Z. So, at least from that standpoint, you know, hopefully we're not going too far off the reservation with any of this stuff. Yeah, okay. So I think one meeting in July and one meeting in August makes sense. Oh, Glenn, you have your hand up. Glenn, was there something?
I'd like to ask the 15 people who are currently here, how many are available for a July and August meeting, and just have everyone put their hand up who's available. And then you'll have an idea of how practical this is.
All right, I will stop sharing so I can have a better view. So everyone who's okay with one meeting in July and one meeting in August, please raise your hand. Can't see everyone at once, but all right. Yeah, I'm failing at this. I can't. I don't know how to see like everyone at once. I have to scroll through.
I think there's critical mass of hands raised.
Okay, there you go. Thank you, Glenn. All right. I think with that, we can call our meeting, and hopefully, you know, we'll see each other at the next full board meeting. Good progress today. You know, I'm glad we got through the topical committees and the regional committees. Those were, you know, some probably our biggest things to address. Thanks, Joanne, so much for giving us guidance for both those things. That was invaluable. And yeah, so we'll see each other at the next board meeting and July and August. Looking forward to seeing everyone then. Thanks. Have a good night.
Have a good night, everybody. Bye.
Good night, everyone.
Night.